Orale! Bienvenidos and welcome to the Familia FFB podcast. This is your host, Jorge Martin, Familia NFL Insider series. We just keep hitting home runs all the time. To connecting on long bombs, 90-yard runs every time we're doing this. And we've got another great show for you on tap right now. Also, want to make sure that you're going to YouTube. When you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Hit that thumbs up, hit that subscriber button, set your notifications because we are going to be having these on the regular. Here we are, when we're recording this, it's late June. We're going to keep doing these all the way till late July. Keep dropping them in. So set those notifications. I know you're watching because I see the numbers are growing both in the viewers and the subscribers. So appreciate that. Also want to make sure you're going to underdogfantasy.com. Make sure you use that promo code Familia23. Familia 23 if you want to do it in Spanish. For the first $100 that you deposit, you're going to get matched another $100, dollar for dollar, get matched. So make sure to get in there, play the best ball, get in those best ball drafts. I'm in three right now, three slow drafts right now. So get in there, slow drafts, fast drafts. As you guys have seen, we've done some right here on Familia FFB. So, but yeah, use that promo code Familia23 and you're going to draft all the way up to kickoff and the 2023 season. And Familia, one of my favorite people, someone I've known the longest of all the insiders that we had. I mean, gosh, we worked side to side, so many places. I just, he is now the authority, at least one of the authorities when it comes to all things Raiders. He's with the Las Vegas Review Journal. He's one of the hosts on Raider Nation Radio, 9:20 a.m. Let's welcome in our amigo Vinny Bonsignore. Vincenzo, welcome, bienvenute.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And yeah, we although I compete with Vic Tafer and Paul Gutierrez and Tayshawn Reed over at the Athletic and ESPN Athletic with Tayshawn and Vic, they're excellent too. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate that because I have all due respect for my colleagues and friends.
Oh man, and yeah, the people that you spend a lot of Sundays with those people. So going around with them but yeah, again, being able to talk about this team, 24/7, 365. It's been one of it's never a dull moment when it comes to the Raider Nation, and we're gonna jump right into the quarterback, Jimmy G, replacing Derek Carr, the longtime quarterback. And unfortunately for Davante Adams, who really had that great connection with him, but going to Jimmy G now, there is the intrigue about his foot. Yeah. And but you also said he was very much the Vegas Golden Knights. He was very much supporting and all the way to the championship. By the way, I hope Vegas has recovered. But speaking of recovered, there's questions about his foot. And also about what the offense is going to look like with him at quarterback compared to Derek Carr. Can kind of updates on both?
Yeah, in terms of the foot, obviously Jimmy G hurt the foot, I want to say in early December last season with the San Francisco 49ers. We all know how that kind of turned out. Brock Purdy jumps in and doesn't miss a beat, and then he gets hurt in the NFC Championship game, and there went the 49ers' hopes of going to the Super Bowl. But it is important to remember that Jimmy G was playing some pretty good football prior to his injury and had the 49ers on track for a pretty big season. But he did get hurt. And, I think what happened with Brock Purdy and the 49ers kind of want to give Trey Lance a chance as well. There really wasn't any room left for Jimmy G. And he ends up here with the Raiders. Now, here's the tricky part about it. He suffered that injury so late in the season that by the time free agency came about, there's still some concern about the foot. And as a result, he wasn't able to pass the physical. In fact, the Raiders doctors, when they did give him the physical, figured out, you're going to need some cleanup on the foot, and that necessitated a surgery, and the contract was kind of rewritten to reflect that. But I think it's important to remember, Jorge, that there's a lot of players in the NFL, and sometimes some key players, that if you were to have to ask them to take a physical in March, they may not pass based on what had happened the year before. There's a lot of guys, a lot of players that have to that are still rehabbing from injuries that they suffered late in the season last year, and whatever surgeries that might have resulted. But the long story being short, if they were to take a physical in March, there's some players that just wouldn't be able to pass it at that point. The good news is for them, they stay on their rehab track, and at some point they're going to be able to pass a physical and get on the field. And I think that's what the Raiders believe is going to be the case with Jimmy G. It just wasn't able to happen in March, and the difference obviously is that he was a free agent, where other players that we're talking about are already under contract. And so just for like a little bit of a history lesson for players that aren't ready, and there will be a handful, I'm sure, by the time training camp starts, that's where you start hearing about the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list. That's where players go to kind of remove them a little bit from the roster, and they're not able to practice until they're able to actually pass that physical and then come off the PUP list and start participating. So that's kind of the situation that Jimmy G is in right now. But all indications are that at some point in training camp, if not the very start of training camp, he's going to be ready to go. And everyone that I talk to, at least, talks optimistically about that proposition. In terms of how it changes the offense, I think it does subtly change the offense. I don't think you're probably not going to see. Let's just assume that Jimmy G stays healthy. I know that's a big, but let's just assume that he does. I think the hope for the Raiders is that he elevates their efficiency level. It might not be reflected in the more gaudy numbers that maybe Derek Carr was kind of known for, the high passing yards and throwing the ball downfield as often as he sometimes did. But what the Raiders think could happen is that they may trade some of that for a little bit more efficiency. And when we're talking about efficiency, you're talking about the red zone, where the Raiders have just had issues over the years, sustaining success when they get into the 20-yard line or closer of their opponents. And I think it was our good friend Josh Dubow from the Associated Press up north, up in the Bay Area. I think he put out a tweet that said, since 2013, of the 30 quarterbacks, or 30, I think it was 38 quarterbacks that threw over a certain amount of passes in the red zone, and Jimmy G fits into that category. I think he was ranked 8th in terms of passer percent or ranking and efficiency level in the red zone, whereas Derek Carr was in the 30s in that number. And not to disparage anybody or throw anybody under the bus, but that's a pretty big difference. And I think that if the Raiders' hope is that Jimmy G helps in that area, understanding this offense, maybe being able to handle the situation a little bit better in the red zone. And then you're talking also about just extending drives, and it might look a little bit different. They may not be a long ball team this year. Jimmy G hasn't really been known for that in his career. But I think, and just based on what we saw in OTAs and minicamp, granted Jimmy wasn't out there, but the wide receiver group that they've built right now, take Davante out of there, he could do things all over the field. But it sure felt like there was a kind of a mandate or a plan in place on those underneath passes, those crossing patterns, getting balls to players in space and letting those athletes then take it from there, kind of like what the 49ers did with Jimmy G. So that might look a little bit different. But I guess the long or the short answer to a very long-winded answer that I'm giving you is the Raiders, it might look different, but the Raiders are hoping that efficiency level leads to a more consistent offense. And last thing I'll leave you with, I know, and I've gotten this question a lot, how can the Raiders get rid of a quarterback in Derek Carr who helped orchestrate a top 12 offense in the NFL last year? And, that's a valid question. And when you look at it, just look at the final number and say, wow, the Raiders averaged, the 12th most points in the game in the NFL. That looks really good. But then if you peel it back a little bit, here's the issue. And this is what led to Derek Carr's demise. There was a point in time where they were a top 5 offense last year in October, late October. And it was a very steady slide from that point. So they slid down to 12th. And so when you look at it from that perspective over the last 2 months of the season, the offensive efficiency really started suffering, and it led to them finishing 12th rather than in the top 5 or top 10 in offense in the NFL. When you look at it from the bigger picture of everything, or the full picture of everything, you can understand why when Derek didn't play well down the stretch, which he didn't, and he's come out and kind of admitted that, that's really what led to their decision to A, bench him, and then B, go in a different direction this year.
Okay, that makes sense. So, you talked about it being a little bit different, and I think there's been a lot of concern, and actually I think I don't know if it's warranted, because Davante Adams, he was still, I mean, in a new offense, he was still just so incredible last year. Granted, he had history with Derek Carr, but he was still good when Jarrett Stidham came in.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, is it almost like with him that I consider him still in his prime. We're for this season. I mean, is it almost like he's quarterback proof, and that Jimmy G is just going to figure out a way? This is my wide receiver one. I'm going to get him 170, 180 targets this season.
In some ways, yes. But you just mentioned the 180 targets. I think that's what it was this year or last year for him, 182 targets, which I believe was a career high by a pretty good margin. And then you look at the fact that it was 180 targets and 100. Again, you look at the numbers for Davante last year. 100, I think it was 100 catches, over 1,000 yards. But he's never had that many targets and that few receptions. Usually he's, even in years where it's in the 113 or so catches, it's come on less or fewer targets. So there was a pretty big disparity there. Like, he was targeted a ton of times, which rightfully so. But again, the efficiency level of getting him the ball at a higher level just wasn't there. There were a lot of passes, and we'd have to go look at the film to really figure out, all right, were they just bad passes? Did he I don't remember him dropping a whole lot of balls. Maybe you could correct me on that, but I don't remember him dropping a lot of balls. So what happened on those 80 or so passes, targets that went incomplete, right? So again, you look at Davante's numbers, and they were really spectacular in a lot of ways, but you look them a little bit closer, and it sure felt like there was a lot of meat left on that bone. And can Jimmy G come in and again kind of clean that up a little bit so that it's even more efficient with Davante?
Yeah, that to me is the interesting part. I mean, I know Jimmy G may not take as many shots down the field but does that, but if he's taking shorter shots, Davante still does his thing. I mean, yeah, could those, if the targets are still up there, could that add another 10 or 15 receptions to him, which would be just, I mean, phenomenal. So
another part of that is there is film out there. In fact, this past weekend, I looked at a lot of Jimmy G film, because I'd heard, oh well, he doesn't take shots down the field. Well, I did see plenty of examples of him taking shots down the field, but I don't think there's any question that it's not it doesn't match like other quarterbacks and their attempts on the field. And the one thing I think we'll probably never really know was that because Jimmy G was reluctant to do it or couldn't do it, even though there's definitely visual evidence of him completing long passes, or was that the way the 49ers offense was structured, and Kyle Shanahan just wanted to take advantage of the athletes that they had offensively, and getting those players balls in space and in stride on shorter length routes. So there's probably a little bit of all of that in it, but I would imagine that what Kyle was trying to do with his offense probably predicated and dictated a little bit how many shots Jimmy G did or didn't take down the field.
And how much of the pie is going to be left for Jacoby Myers, maybe Hunter Renfrow, who I think is in the fantasy community is getting, I think he's getting unfortunately pushed down, and maybe the rookie Michael Mayer.
Yeah, well, when you say that out loud, it really, you start thinking about, wow, how good can this offense really be? Because I think that the players that you just mentioned represent, considerable talent, and I think Jakobi Meyers is better suited as a number 2. I think Michael Mayer, and don't forget Austin Hooper is here too, and he has a little bit of history in the NFL. But I think Michael Mayer has a chance to just step right in and really be one of those really good Raider type tight ends. I felt like watching Hunter Renfrow during OTAs, it felt like, you got to remember or think about this. I know you do, but when we're talking about Hunter Renfrow, there's no doubt that last season was a disappointing season. And I know we've seen all the rumors about him getting traded. I feel like that's a bit of a long shot. And I don't think that's going to happen. But also when you go back to last year, this was a player who just had unfortunate luck. And it goes back to that second game of the season. I know Raider fans don't want to remember this, but they were up, I think, 20 points on the Cardinals at Allegiant Stadium, game 2. And then it got away from him. And all of a sudden you're in overtime. And that's where Hunter Renfrow suffered what was really a devastating concussion on the last play of the game. Remember, they threw the pass to him. He was fighting for a first down. It was a devastating hit. He coughs the ball up. It goes the other direction for a game-winning touchdown for the Cardinals. And on top of it all, Hunter is hurt. And I remember seeing him in the locker room after that game, and it was not a good sight. You could tell that he took a really big blow to the head. And it really, I don't know if Hunter ever really recovered necessarily from that, because on top of that, then he suffered another injury somewhere along the way after returning. He just never got on track last year. I know we live in a society where, you're in a rush to just find something new or get rid of this person, or just it didn't work, so you got to go in a different direction. Well, I'm not making any excuses, but there's some valid explanations for why Hunter didn't have the type of season that he's capable of. And I don't think that he's somebody that in this offense is going to have the 100 or so receptions that he had. 2021? But even if you look back at 2021, that was out of necessity. Remember, Darren Waller went down in the Thanksgiving game against the Cowboys, so he's out of the equation. And then we all know what happened with Henry Ruggs in that situation. That took another big time weapon out of the fold. You were down to Zay Jones, and they brought in Deshaun Jackson. It kind of got to a point where Hunter was the go-to guy right there, especially when Darren went out. So I think his numbers were a little inflated in 2021. I think his model is more what he was doing especially that rookie year of his career. And so if he could get just back to that, a 60 catch guy, I think that's going to go a long way in this Raiders offense. And the Hunter Renfrow that I saw in OTAs and minicamp looked healthy and looked to be back on track. And then you throw in Jakobi Meyers, and then you throw in Michael Mayer. And I really liked what I saw from DeAndre Carter, who the Raiders got the Chargers in free agency. And I really liked what I saw from Trey Tucker, from the rookie from Cincinnati. So it seems like a collection of all this various different types of skill sets and things that players are bringing to the table. And if Jimmy is out there, he and Josh McDaniels, I think, have a lot of weapons at their disposal and ways to attack opponents. And when you talk about a Carter, when you talk about a Trey Tucker, they may not be out on the field, every single down. I don't expect them to be, but in certain situations, those are guys that I think the Raiders are going to be able to get some big plays out of. Maybe it's a key first down, in a game. Maybe it's a 2nd and 13 and you get 17 yards out of it. Like, it doesn't have to be on a play-by-play basis, but a situational basis. I think those guys have a chance to really help this offense.
Awesome. Well, let's talk about, Josh Jacobs for a second. And, he was phenomenal last year. And actually you had said that he was going to be the clear running back last year, the clear top running back on the team. He was going to be the first option. I think people still expected a lot of, more of a committee backfield of, like McDaniels had in New England, but they also have history of, if a guy is good, they ride him.
Right.
Josh Jacobs didn't love getting the franchise tag. So, but it's, I mean, the way the NFL is for running backs right now, it's almost like they always have to, earn their pay every year.
Mhm.
Is Josh Jacobs behind a pretty good offensive line that improved a lot last season? I mean, is 2,000 too much? But I mean, getting close to it at least a possibility.
Well, a couple things. It's interesting going back to last year and thinking about the committee talk, which I think was a safe assumption based on what Josh McDaniels had done in the past. But I do give Josh McDaniels credit. We know this, covering baseball and you working for the Dodgers. I want to say it was Grady Little back in the day once said, players decide who plays or not. That it's usually in the player's hands who ends up playing the most by performance, by practice habits, by all that. It's you show the manager or the coach that you deserve to be out there, you're probably going to be out there. And in Josh Jacobs's case, and Josh McDaniels' case as well, to me, McDaniels showed flexibility and saying, you know what, maybe we did to do this in previous years. Maybe this is what I kind of prefer, but this guy's just playing so well. And he's so durable right now that there's no need to change that up. So I give him credit for, being flexible enough to go in that direction. All that said, I do wonder when you look back at, 300 plus carries for Josh Jacobs, there's a lot of usage. At some point, even if he does sign the long-term contract or plays this year on the franchise tag, is that a model that's repeatable and sustainable? And I would think, and this has nothing to do or nothing against Josh, at all, in terms of Josh Jacobs. But would it be more conducive for the Raiders to share the load a little bit, to make sure that he's as healthy as possible down the stretch, and certainly at the end of games when they really need him. So I would think that you're probably going to see more of Zamir White and maybe even Britton Brown, the other second year running back. And so while Josh Jacobs' numbers might not be as gaudy as they were last year, that doesn't mean he can't have every bit the same type of an impact that he had last year. He'll just do it in fewer carries, which might be the best for him and the team in the long run.
No, yeah, you're okay. Okay, so I'm going to keep an eye on Zamir White, and at the end of drafts, possibly, because the other part about it is Josh Jacobs has battled some injuries in the past, so and you're right. The attrition at the running back position is just like no other position. So, gosh, I mean, those car crashes just start piling up after all.
Yeah.
I touched on it a little bit, and you just recently had an article on this in the Las Vegas Review Journal talking about how the offensive line just kind of came up and became a strength of the team by the end of I believe it was by the end of the season. It was the number 10 offensive line by Pro Football Focus. Is this unit still shaping up to be a strength of the team?
Yeah, and give the offensive line a lot of credit. Jermaine Illuminor in particular for really solidifying that right tackle position, and then Alex Bars as well at right guard. I think in an ideal world, I think the Raiders understand that they probably still need to make some upgrades along the offensive line, and maybe out of the collection of players that they've brought into on the roster going into training camp, maybe that's going to organically happen. And so you might not see the same starting five. You might, and I think they feel like they could win football games if this offensive line just comes back intact as it did last year. But I think guys like Thayer Munford, the second-year player, from Ohio State, I think they're going to give him every chance to maybe even beat out a Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle. Maybe Jermaine Illuminor becomes the answer at right guard. But there's ways that they're going to be able to still compete and ultimately come up with an offensive line that they feel like they can win football games with. It took a little while last year, and I know a lot of people were kind of complaining, that they went a month or so into the season before really settling in on the final five. But there were some extenuating circumstances there too. Alex Leatherwood was going to get his opportunity in training camp. Obviously, that didn't work. You had John Simpson, a returning starter, and he was given an opportunity to hold on to his job and got time during the regular season to do that. It just wasn't working. And I remember, talking to some people kind of behind the scenes about, the complaints about using the first month of the season to figure out who that best starting five and that best group was going to be. The response I would always get is, hey, if we don't know, why should we just pretend like we know? It's still an ongoing situation. And I think when you go back to last year and that first month of the season, the open competition, some of the tinkering that was going on, it led to a favorable outcome. And I think that's what they were looking for. And who knows if that would have happened had they just stuck with whatever they felt like they needed to stick with, because everyone figures out in training camp who you're starting 5 offensive linemen in is, and they're going to roll with that and just leave it as is. They didn't know, and they admitted that, and they gave it a little bit more time to get figured out. And I think that's part of the reason why that ended up being, what turned out to be, a very viable offensive line, which was actually considered a weakness going into the season. Now they have to try to replicate it and get better. And I think that there are some new faces and some players that, are just getting better and growing and maturing. And it'll be interesting to see kind of where it all leads in training camp to see if that same starting five is the starting five that rolls out there against the Denver Broncos in the season opener.
Yeah, and, I think it's always and it's kind of organic to the NFL. You're always competing for your job anyway,
Yeah.
and there's always someone gunning for your job. So, and the NFL is merciless. They're, if someone else is, if a second year player is coming up and doing better, they're going to put him in. So,
Yeah.
And especially when it comes to the O line, and I mean McDaniel's coming from protecting Tom Brady. It's you're making sure that Tom Brady is protected. I know it's a priority. It's my gratuitous mention of Tom Brady possibly coming out of retirement.
We had an interesting conversation on the radio show today, and I've written about how it's easy to sit here and say, oh, Tom Brady could come save the day if need be. Come down from the owner's box if need be. But there's a lot that has to happen for that to happen. First of all, no owner can just go play for the team. That has to be approved by 24 other owners. And there's a process for that to happen. And that stands for Stan Kroenke and Jerry Jones, all the way down to Tom Brady, if he is, ultimately approved as a minority owner of the Raiders. And I don't know, but I have a hard time believing that if you're an owner of an AFC team, and the Raiders are in contention, and all of a sudden they need to turn to Tom Brady, are you going to vote to approve that? Why would you, right? That's a competitive type thing that I'm not sure a whole lot of owners would want to do. But we did on the radio show come up with a scenario of, okay, let's just say the Raiders surprise and get to 9-2, right? And Jimmy goes down at that point. Is that something that you consider if you're the Raiders and you don't think that Aiden O'Connell, the rookie, is ready to take over at that point with the stakes kind of getting a little higher than you thought they were? Is that at least a conversation that you have to try to figure out, is this even possible to have Tom come down? And because the way I see it, if you're 9-2 and you're in contention for the playoffs, don't you kind of owe it to everybody to do whatever you got to take to make sure you kind of try to seize that moment as much as possible?
No, absolutely. And I hope the YouTube algorithm was listening. We threw out Tom Brady's name so that,
Right.
make sure that this is going to be out, out in there. So
Right.
last football question. When it comes to the defense, this was definitely a forgiving defense. Whenever Max Crosby didn't get home and hit the quarterback, obviously they added Tyree Wilson in the draft. Where, are they vulnerable? Are they improved against the pass or the run?
Well, I wish I could, for the sake of the Raider fans' blood pressure, I wish I could sit here and say yes to both of those questions, but I don't know. We're gonna have to wait and see when the games get started. I do feel like I do think that there's reason for hope for this defense. I'm not gonna sit here and say a top 10 defense. I think that's unrealistic. But I think that there's the moves that they made in free agency, albeit on a very kind of a subtler level, than they did the year before, bringing in Chandler Jones. But I think that some of those moves made a lot of sense and should be able to help immediately. I'm talking about guys like Marcus Epps and Duke Shelley and Robert Spillane, the middle linebacker that they brought in from the Pittsburgh Steelers. David Long from the Rams, who had some pretty good moments on a Super Bowl team, with the Rams, and then bringing in a Jacorian Bennett from Maryland. Obviously, you just mentioned Tyree Wilson. Chandler Jones was playing his best football right before he got hurt. And was lost for the season. So, can that Chandler Jones be more present over the bulk of the season rather than those last 4 weeks that he played really good football? And then what really needs to happen though is the Raiders need to guys like Nate Hobbs and Trayvon Merrick and Divine Diablo, all of whom, and I've written about this. I went back and looked at Trayvon Merrick, the safety from TCU. If you go back to his junior year at TCU, he had one defensive coordinator his junior year, then a completely different system as a senior. And he comes into his rookie year and is playing for Gus Bradley, has to learn that system. And then the very next year, he's learning Patrick Graham's system. That's 4 defensive coordinators in 4 years. Divine Diablo last year was going into his 3rd new defensive coordinator. Same with Nate Hobbs. Coming in from rookie or from senior year to rookie to second year with the Raiders. That's a lot of disruption. And on top of all that, all 3 of those players got hurt at one point or another during the season. So I know, again, we live in a society where you want it right now, but that's a lot of disruption for some young players that still have a lot of talent. Trayvon Merrick was playing really well as a rookie, as was Nate Hobbs. And Divine Diablo was, leading the Raiders in tackles last year before he got hurt. I think he was the 8th leading tackler in the NFL at that point in time, and he was lost for the season about 8 or so games in. If the Raiders can get all 3 of those players, you kind of headed in the right direction. And in Nate's case and Trayvon's case, back to who they were as rookies, now going into year 2 and Patrick Graham's healthy and presumably healthy, it just changes the entire dynamic of the defense. And that doesn't even get into what can Tyree Wilson add to the pass rush in conjunction, with spelling. He'll be spelling Chandler Jones. He'll be spelling Max Crosby at times, but there's going to be many scenarios where all 3 of those players are on the field at the same time. And it has the potential for some pretty decent firepower getting after the quarterback. So there really is reason for some hope. Things have to happen, and there's a few ifs in there. We know ifs don't always turn out to be certainties. But if some of these guys, and it's not like, to me anyway, we're not talking about outlandish, there's no way. Of course you can see Nate Hobbs getting back on track. Of course you can see Trayvon Merrick. These are talented football players. Of course, just watch the film of Tyree Wilson. I mean, if he can translate into the NFL, that's a big difference maker along the defensive line. So there really is reason for hope. But again, it's the Raiders defense. We've been talking about it for years now. It's time for them to not just be talking about it, but to actually do it. And if they do it, and the offense, when we mentioned a lot of the weapons and year 2 again, under Josh McDaniels' system, there really is reason for hope. But it's the NFL, it's professional sports. Anything can happen, and you got to see it all come together on the field.
Yeah, well, that's something I'm going to be watching because I know I targeted the Raiders a lot last year. Just fun shootouts. It was for some fun shootouts for fantasy.
And that's the other part. 9 of their 11 losses were within 1 score. They had double-digit leads in five games and lost 4 times. It's a fine line league, and in a lot of cases, the games that they were winning down the stretch in 2021, those close games, kind of eluded them in 2022. If they can just turn their fortunes around in a few of those games, it changes the entire complexion and dynamic of the season. So I guess if you are looking at things optimistically, this wasn't a team that just didn't look like it belonged on the field with the vast majority of their opponents. In fact, they had leads against a whole bunch of them. Things just didn't go their way, and if they can get that kind of straightened out a little bit, again, there's genuine reason for hope. I'm not talking about a Super Bowl team or anything like that, but 9 wins, maybe 10. It's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I mean it's not gonna be easy. You got those unicorns. Number 15 in Kansas City, number 10
Right.
in the Chargers, and Sean Payton coming in and seeing if he can fix. So it's gonna be fun. Oh, Vinny
Yeah,
B, thank you so much. Hey, you
absolutely.
know what? We're getting at the start of summer. You know, so I've actually had a couple people that in NFL Insiders say that they're going to be going to Vegas. You got a couple restaurants to recommend? I know that you got your staple.
Yeah. There's so many. There really are a lot of great
Yeah,
restaurants.
one of the great eating cities in the world.
Yes, and what I find living in Henderson and going over to Summerlin, there's a lot of great off strip restaurants, but pretty much every restaurant at the Cosmo, every restaurant over at the Wynn, you really can't go wrong whatsoever. You like Italian food, you like Asian food, you like Mexican food. There's a Javier's over at the Aria. Bobby Flay's is at the Cosmopolitan. It's an Italian restaurant that he has over there. It's Amalfi's. So that's a great place. It's endless. It really is. I remember having a conversation with Andre James, the Raiders center, and he's a big foodie, and he was talking about, the thing is, every time you think that you've hit all the great restaurants here in Las Vegas, which is virtually impossible, but even if you think that you did, by the time you did, there's like 10 new spots that opened up in the meantime that you got to now circle back to those new 10. So it's never, ever, ever ending.
Oh man, it's tough to get a rotation. Well, it's never ending. That I love reconnecting with you, Vinny. So thank you so much for doing this. So
Absolutely.
yeah, close up shop. What you got coming up these next like month and a half or so until training camp?
Yeah, trying to unplug just a little bit. I do have a story coming out. Look for it online at vegasnation.com, but projecting the 53-man roster, kind of going through some of the options awaiting Josh Jacobs, with his contract situation. That'll be out. But mostly it's just kind of waiting until training camp starts late July. So looking forward to it.
Oh, Vinny B, thank you so much. I can't.
You got it.
Yeah, give him a follow at Vinny Bonsignore on Twitter. So he's awesome, awesome. Vinny B, thank you so much for doing this. Muchas gracias, un millón de gracias, and thank
Thank
you
you.
everybody for watching, listening, wherever you get it. So make sure once again you're going to YouTube. You give us that thumbs up. You hit that subscriber button, and also if you're going to Underdog, please use that promo code Familia 23. You're going to get matched that first $100. I'm Jorge Martin. You can find me at Jorge Martin 17 on Twitter, at Familia FFB on the other socials, and I'll keep having a little something coming out on FamiliaFFB.com. But everything I pushed out on Twitter. So once again, muchas gracias to Vinny, and remember, todos somos familia. Salud.